Well, welcome back, everybody. As I said, we're going to have a lot more interviews and guests here in 2022. And this week, I am super excited to welcome my friend Wesley, Dr. Wesley Northey, to the podcast and have him share his story. So, before we dive into your story, Wesley, could you just tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Hey, Kelly. I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. You are a friend. We were just talking about how long we've known each other now. It's amazing how quickly time flies. But yeah, before jumping into the entire story, I am a doctor of physical therapy. I'm a master massage therapist. I'm a professional male model. I'm a life coach. I'm a motivational speaker now. I am a father of 5 kids. I'm a married man, a man of faith, and I'm blessed. Honestly, I'm getting to live my second chance at life, and so I'm excited to share some of that story with your viewers and your audience.
I love that you have so many titles and so many ways of identifying yourself. Okay, thank you. And I can't wait for you to share your story. So let's dive right in. The floor is yours.
Amazing. Thank you again. I really appreciate it. So, one great place to start to give some context and background is a few years ago, I was at home, very confused because I had just spent over a decade of my life accomplishing things that I had previously thought would never be possible. The trauma that I experienced growing up from a very early age left me suffering with severe depression for many years. I had been an eighth grade dropout of school. I started working full time out of the back of a kitchen at the age of 14, the day after my 14th birthday. We had many different tragedies that had happened. I ended up becoming a teenage father very young, not knowing how to be a dad. I had been homeless at one point, and honestly, really, really struggling with my sense of identity, my sense of self worth and purpose in life. And I hit rock bottom. I really did. I hit rock bottom. I literally thought the world would be better without me. And I was blessed with a second chance. And so, over that period of time, I was given a whole new opportunity. I said, God, if you're up there, lead me, I'll follow. And I just began making new choices in life each day. I went back to school. I ended up earning a doctorate, a leadership excellence award, being asked to speak at my commencement ceremony with the program. Started a life that I never thought would be possible with my best friend, becoming a good man, a good husband, a good father, all these things in our dream home. And that's what was so confusing, was being home in this instant, feeling like I still wasn't good enough. I'd spent all of this time doing all of the right things, recovering, healing, forgiving, accomplishing, achieving, becoming successful, all of these things, to still feel like I'm just not good enough deep down. I'll always be a failure. And I'll never forget that moment. And I thought, okay, God, what now? What do I do now? I thought I was doing everything right. Why do I still feel this way inside? And a short time later, I was working out to a random playlist, and a voice came on one of the tracks, and it said, "You need a new mind." And it literally sounded like the voice of God. And I stopped everything I was doing. I looked down at this audio track, and they had taken a recording from Bishop T.D. Jakes, who at the time I was not familiar with. I would recommend anyone look him up, but he does sound like God. And I listened to him speak about having a new mindset, and how dare you go into a new year with the same old mind. And something clicked for me. Something changed, and I realized before I could change how I feel about myself in my heart, I have to change what I believe about myself in my mind. And I knew from physical therapy school, studying the brain, studying neuroscience, working on cadavers, I've literally held human brains in my hand to study it. I knew that the brain can change. I knew the concept of neuroplasticity because we studied it around rehab for traumatic brain injuries and folks that had previously had strokes, that you could change the brain in new, dynamic, compelling ways. And I thought, if that's possible, I can change my brain. I can change my mindset. And I did. I became absolutely obsessed. I discovered for the first time in my life the world of personal development. Guys like Tony Robbins and Les Brown, among others, enrolled in coaching programs, got as many books that I could read, as many audiobooks that I could listen to. I would literally start my day with some form of mentorship and coaching and motivation in my ear from the moment I woke up. I'd be at the gym, I'd be in the car, I'd be doing chores before I went to sleep. My wife wouldn't even know when I had somebody in my ear because I just had like an AirPod in my ear at all times. But I became so consumed by the thought that I can rewire my brain that I actually was able to. And what happened was, for the first time in my life, I had people consistently in my ear speaking life into me, telling me that they believed in me. And I literally started framing it in my mind that they were talking to me directly. And I thought, well, if these guys believe in me, I need to believe in me. And so I really began to. And I developed what I call a purpose mindset. And I've known from past experience that life isn't a straight line. It never is. Nothing in life is. We have ups and downs. We have difficult times and challenges. Those are necessary for growth. But I knew that serving purpose can be something that you can set your mind to every day intentionally in order to have fulfillment and peace and joy and meaning and all the good things that we really desire out of life. We think that we want the new house or the new job or the new car or the new relationship because of the end product that it will give us, a greater sense of happiness. But all of those things are so short lived because whenever you get to the other side where the grass is greener, you're still the one showing up when you get there. When you get the new house or you get the new car or the new relationship, you're still that same person in that new environment with that new position or that new title or that new thing, whatever it might be. And so it's an inner discovery that has to take place around appreciating and being grateful for who you really are and the purpose that you were created for. And I discovered that through this journey and realized that the greatest way to truly fulfill purpose is to serve it. It's not by something that we can claim and we can get and achieve and take for ourselves. It's something that we're able to give others. It's how we show up. It's how we're able to be present. It's how we're able to love and expand by being vulnerable and opening our hearts, especially when we don't want to, being more compassionate and sharing our gifts. That's how we can serve purpose. And when we do that, the fruit of that becomes fulfillment in life. And so the greatest way, the greatest vehicle for me to be able to do that in my life is through servant leadership specifically. And that's what my life's become. So after that discovery of personal development, I realized that I'm called to be one of those people in that space, in that industry. And as recently as last year, I was able to speak on a virtual platform with Tony Robbins, among others, in front of 18,000 people, sharing my story and being able to tell others that I believe in them, because I knew that that's what I needed. I needed to hear that, because too often we go through challenges in life where we question ourselves and we have self-doubt and we're unsure. And then we give in and we convince ourselves that we can't do it, or we're not good enough, or we're not worthy. And so there's seasons of life that we all go through that we have to be reminded that we have purpose unique to us, to who we are. And sometimes we need somebody else to believe in us in order to pursue that. And so that's what my life's mission has become.
Wow, there are so much in there. First of all, thank you for being here again. I really appreciate this, and so much, yeah, so many directions we could go. But I'm going to try. We've talked about how we can talk for hours. I'm going to
That's right.
try to keep this somewhat succinct for the listeners.
Absolutely.
So, but first, let's go back, because a lot of what you've said, for my listeners in particular here, and people that I'm encouraging to share their story, is that theme of not feeling good enough, not feeling worthy, that starts in early life through whatever experiences, through parenting or adults or the messages that we're getting, and none with the intention of creating problems for us. But we all have things we're dealing with, and we don't always realize how we're passing that on. So, if you wouldn't mind, could you share a little bit of maybe some of those messages that you were getting as a child, as a young man, that led you down that road?
Absolutely. Yeah. You're so right. It happens to so many of us, usually at a very early age. And it's through our formative years when we're in early childhood development where we're really creating a sense of identity around who we are and our place in the world, what we're capable of, and what our true value and our worth is. And we begin determining these things. So, the problem that so many of us run into, including myself, and this is what happened to me, is that we begin associating our mistakes and our failures to our sense of identity.
Mm,
And we don't have enough mentors in our life. It's not any one person's fault necessarily, but the persons of influence in our life don't usually distinguish that difference. When we make failures and we mess up and we don't meet our own expectations or others' expectations in our lives, it doesn't mean that that's because we're a failure. Because we're failing, we're never reminded or very rarely reminded that those failures are literally necessary to grow and to develop and to become better.
mm,
And no one in our lives, usually, again, people of influence, whether it's parents or coaches or teachers or siblings or whoever it might be, reinforces that truth and reaffirms with us it's okay to fail. It's okay. Not only is it okay, you have to do it.
mm,
You have to. Because you're trying anything, you're going to fail. That's part of the journey, that's part of the process. And I know this physically from the study, the work that I have, the education that I have in as a physical therapist, that through rehabilitation and gaining strength and becoming a better version physically, it's only after seeking failure that we can do that. We
mm,
literally have to push our body physically. So we might do that through sports or hobbies or the gym and exercise. And when we go back to rest, our body has the opportunity to say, wow, we had a lot of stress and a lot of resistance introduced. So, in order to come back to meet it head on, we have to build more muscle. We have to build more efficiencies for oxygen and blood flow and all these things that help us develop changes to become stronger so that when we get up the next day, we can meet that new conflict. The body doesn't go to rest and say, man, we sucked today. Wow, did we fail? Let's give up. Let's make sure we're weaker tomorrow, right? But so many of us do that mentally and emotionally to ourselves. We don't have
mm.
expectations that are met. We fail. We make mistakes. We're humiliated. We're embarrassed. Our heart gets broken, whatever the circumstances might be. And no one reaffirms to say, hey, that's part of being able to love more fully. That's part of being able to problem solve better. That's how you're able to become more creative. That's the part of being a better person in these friendships and relationships that you have. So that's something that I believe that we all need to be reminded of. And I know I went way astray for way too long because I developed a sense of identity that I was a failure. And I literally grew into adulthood believing that no matter what I did, deep down I would always be a failure. And it
Right.
didn't matter what I achieved on the external things and goals because I did those things. I learned how to succeed, but my sense of identity didn't change.
Right. So let's just to back up a little bit to that point where you knew that you'd hit rock bottom.
Mm.
You had dropped out of high school in eighth grade. You were homeless. You were having all of these things. What was it that made you realize that you could change things? That you could go back and get your GED, go on to have all of these achievements academically and professionally. Was there something in that moment of rock bottom that said, I'm going to change this?
Mm. Well, I had a sense of purpose because I had become a dad so young, and that's where my greatest sense of failure came in. I thought I had failed already. I was so young, but I already thought that I had failed so deeply. And so I had an opportunity coming out of it to say, well, what if I could? What if I could somehow be a good dad? That was my sense of purpose. That my sole mission was to somehow figure out how to do that. I had no idea how though, but I knew that I could take one step going in a different direction. Because literally when you hit rock bottom and you hit a wall like that in life, there's nowhere else to go. Like that's the end. I was attempting to take my own life. And unfortunately for me, it came that far where I was able to wake up the next day and realize this is it. It's over now. Is it really worth continuing this and life ending? Or is there a possibility that it can get better? And I think hope gets undervalued and underappreciated too much because and I'm speaking to so many people out there that I know have struggled with depression because the rates are through the roof right now. Suicidal thoughts and tendencies and substance abuse is just skyrocketed. So for anyone that's gone through periods of sadness and depression, you know that it hurts. It's painful emotionally to go through these things. But the deeper you get down into this spiral of this dark pit of despair, it almost becomes completely numb. And you begin to really lose hope. That's actually what despair means. It means to have a lack of hope.
Mm.
And so if you have anything to cling to hope, an opportunity to hope that there's a possibility, that there's potential, that something can improve, something can get better. It doesn't have to be that all of life is going to change and all these great things are going to happen and you're going to be totally transformed and everything's going to work out. By no means that is where I was. It was just I had hope and I had a belief that there was a possibility that at least for that day, I could take a new step in the right direction. And what happens over time is those steps compound. And if you just keep going in the right direction and building, you'll be amazed at what's possible. And that's for everybody out there, no matter what you've been through.
Yes, so true. And I love that spark of possibility when you said to yourself, "What if I could be a good dad?" That you were so in that pit of despair that you were thinking you were such a failure. And I think we all go through this in terms of at some point feeling like we couldn't do anything right, or we've tried to do everything and we're not getting there. But having that little nudge of what if? And I think that's a key phrase for anybody who's listening when we're feeling that things aren't going to go right, is to think about that possibility.
Absolutely. And know what happens is it's like planting a seed, and if you start to nurture that and water it and cultivate it, it begins to turn into belief. You can literally transform the beliefs that you have. And that's where so many of us get hung up is that we believe so strongly that we can't change or life can't change or it can't get better or this is just who we are. And we put all these labels on who our identity and our worldview and the stories that we tell ourselves. But if you can start with hope and that potential, that possibility that you're mentioning, Kelly, and you really nurture it, you can begin to change beliefs. And what that does is it literally starts to transform what's happening in the brain, not just in this like theory, but it will literally physically begin to change the brain. And that's where a lot of the neuroscience came in my own journey that I knew that to be true. I
Right.
knew it to be true.
Well,
And so
let's talk about a bit about that part of your journey, because as you said, you got educated, you had all this success, you had the family, the home, the career, I mean basically the American dream, right? And yet here you still were feeling the same way about yourself, that the success hadn't changed how you felt about yourself. So how did you start you did mention that you were listening to all these positive and purposeful people telling you that you had telling you that you had purpose and worth and everything. But what made you even think that that's what you needed?
No, absolutely. What it came down to, one of the biggest, most pivotal realizations on this journey for me was taking ownership. Because so many of the previous hurts and the trauma and the difficulties and the pain and all of the things that I had experienced in my life, it was because of this. It was because of them. They did this and this happened, right? And I had 100 different stories about, well,
Mhm.
this went wrong and that was hard and right. And they were all related to circumstance and other people and how other people affected me, right? And so many of those different pain points and wounds that I was really carrying around, despite the successes and achievements, I was still carrying on to hurt. I had it as this just baggage that I'd cling to. And I realized that all of that was an illusion, that it wasn't because of other people and other things. When I really did the work and I got down to the heart of it, I realized that everything changed when I started to change who I was showing up for myself, how I was treating myself. So anyone can tell you that you're not good enough, or they can say cruel things or demeaning things about you. Anyone in the world can do that. And people do all the time, especially on social media, right? But
Mhm.
it's not until we begin to tell ourselves those things that it becomes a problem and it really enters in and it goes from here down here, right? We have so many different things, points of stimulation and influence and people in our lives and situations that are coming in, and it comes into our mind almost as like a filter. And we get to choose what enters into our heart from there and really gets to us on the deepest level spiritually. And I realized my journey changed in my life when I started treating myself differently and I started talking to myself negatively. When I started convincing myself with my inner dialogue that I wasn't worthy, that I wasn't good enough, that I was stupid, I was a failure, and all these horrible things that I would repeat to myself. That was me doing that to me. And when I realized that, it gave me complete freedom, because now it was no longer the responsibility of the other people in my life and those things that happened and those terrible things and da da da. Now it was just me, and it was me versus me. And I realized the worst, darkest time in my life, I was alone. It was the darker version of me being attacked, really, spiritually, in the darkest way possible, wanting to end my own life. There was no one else there. And so when I realized that I have all of the opportunity to take control back just by taking ownership and recognizing, hey, I became my own worst enemy. I am my harshest critic, right? There's so much freedom in that, because now you can begin to change the game. You can start showing up in your own life as a better version of you, the true version of you. And when you start to do that, that version of you begins to grow and it begins
Right.
to take over.
So, so true. Uh, One of my themes for this year is radical self-love, because for me personally, realizing that even with all the work I've done over the years on changing some of those scripts in my head, changing those messages I was giving myself and that other people had put on me. Two things that you said. One of them was that when you talked about the baggage that you were carrying around, my immediate thought was that actually wasn't your baggage. It was the baggage from all the other people that had put those labels on you or said those things to you. And I realized that's the same for me. It's the same for everybody. And the other thing being that, which I think is super key for everybody, especially these days when we're being bombarded by opinions and anger and fear and everything, is how do we tell ourselves who we really are? How do we recognize who we really are and see our value and worth? And what I would love if you could share with our audience is, do you have a couple of tips or things that you started to do where someone can start at the beginning to start replacing those messages and start believing in their own worth and value?
100%. I love so much also that you brought up the power of self love, right? To me, that's something that when you truly love someone is when you trust, respect, and admire them, right? And that's something I believe is so important for us to do for ourselves, to become somebody that we trust,
Mm.
right? So when we are alone, how are we treating ourselves? How are we speaking to ourselves? Or are we just trying to drown it out with more Netflix and box wine? Right.
Right.
Right. Are we somebody when we're by ourselves that we can trust? The same, to be treated the same way that we would treat a loved one, right? Are we somebody that we can respect by the choices that we make? Not the choices that everybody gets to see publicly or how we curate our social media feed, right?
Mhm.
Are we somebody that we can respect in the choices that we make when no one's looking, right? Are we showing up as somebody that we can admire? That if we think about who we were when we were a child, we all had role models and people that we looked up to that we wanted to be like when we grew up. We all have that opportunity to be that person, that
Mm.
the child inside of us could have been like, oh my gosh, what if I could be like Kelly when I'm big, right? When little Wesley could see grown me now, right? I would have
Right.
admired me showing up as a good man, a good husband, a good father, all these great things. I'd be like a superhero in little Wesley's eyes now, right? So if you can take those things and you start showing up for yourself in that way, there's no other opportunity, right, than to really truly appreciate and start to love who you are. The purpose mindset that I mentioned earlier
Mhm.
is recognizing that it's not just something that you accomplish and you're there suddenly. Nothing in life works that way. It's always this continuous journey. But if we approach every day as a new start, it's a fresh start. Let's set our mind over again. Let's renew our mind. Let's set our intentions. Let's get very purposeful about who we're going to show up as today and how we're going to show up, what we're going to think, what we're going to say, what we're going to do, and do the very best that we can as if every day is a new opportunity to do that. Then it can continue on. But so many of us, and you and I know this from being in this industry and in this space, so many people will have this massive breakthrough in their life and then slowly drift back in the same old way of thinking and doing and behaving. And we have to recognize that there are practices that we can implement every day to renew that. So, the big three for me related to a purpose mindset is practicing being present, because so often we're either caught up in the past, reliving usually disempowering, unhealthy memories that were embarrassing and horrible, and we're hitting the repeat button on those things in the past, or we're projecting out into the future and getting super anxious about what might happen and what if this goes wrong, and worried in a state of
Mm.
chronic worry. Very rarely do we intentionally get present with where we are. Right now, I've been able to practice being present in my own life, that I can be fully present here with you. We can engage in this great conversation, recording this interview that's hopefully going to serve many people, and my mind isn't elsewhere, worried about the next appointments and worried about, well, what if I just messed up a moment ago and didn't say something the right way? Can be totally present. Well, what if you were able to do that with the relationships in your life, with the people that matter to you? Whether it's your clients you're serving, your coworkers, your family, if you were able to be more present with them consistently. The second part is practicing gratitude. And I know that sounds so cliche because it's really popular right now, but that's awesome. I'm so glad it's popular. I know that tends to cheapen things when it becomes just part of the mainstream, but literally practicing being grateful is so important. And here's one of the main reasons why: because there is literally a process called hedonic adaptation that we all go through as human beings. And it's going from something that we're very passionate and excited about and enthusiastic about in our life. Say, for instance, it's a new car. You know that all your senses are taking in everything in that moment when you get the car, right? Like the new smell and the shine and and everything's great with your vehicle. And then it's your car. Right?
Right.
Might be a year later, might be 2 years, but eventually it's your car, right? There's a window of time that takes place. There's a process that takes place that we have to adapt and normalize these things in our life. So we do it with people in our life. You might meet somebody that you love, and it's so exciting when you first meet them, and then they're your wife, they're your husband, they're your boyfriend.
Right.
They're your girlfriend. There's a window of time. And so, in order to prevent that process from fully, completely taking over in these areas of your life where you just take everything for granted, is literally practicing gratitude, savoring those things, reminding yourself, bringing it up to the forefront of your conscious mind and awareness, saying, this is a good thing. This person in my life is great. I'm blessed. This job that I have that I've been miserable at is actually a great thing that one time in my life I really wanted and I worked hard for, right? All these things, if we continually bring those things to the forefront of our conscious awareness, subconsciously, we're living in a state of gratitude more often. And if you're in a state of gratitude, it's much less likely that you're going to end up being in a state of anger and fear and frustration and anxiety and depression if you're constantly getting back into gratitude. The last one is practicing connection. And we are in a digital age where theoretically we should be more connected than ever. But so many of us feel disconnected. We
So
we
true.
we compare our life, the realities of what we're going through in life, to what we see online.
Hmm.
And everyone figures out the perfect highlight reel, and we see all the great angles and the photos and the parties and the stuff, and everyone's rich and fit and has the greatest marriage, and they're living the dream, partying every day, and then it's our life.
And we're sitting on the couch with the box wine and the Netflix in our sweats and thinking, what is wrong with me?
Exactly. Exactly. And we're so disconnected when we should be more connected. And that's a real problem. So not only are we disconnected from others, we're disconnected internally as
Mhm.
well. Our physical state is disconnected from our mental state, which is disconnected from our emotional home and state, which is disconnected from our spiritual state. And we're not living in this centered, aligned place where it's like, man, I know I'm feeling great physically. I'm feeling the best I can mentally and emotionally and spiritually. And I'm connecting with others around me, right? So we really have to practice being more connected. And that again starts from the inside out. It starts from recognizing and being very real with yourself. Hey, I'm not in a good place emotionally right now. I'm not going to try to sweep it under the rug or subdue it. Or maybe physically, I've been in pain, or I'm not where I need to be with my fitness or my health. I need to get these things in order. And the more that we actually get connected in mind, body, heart, and spirit, the more that we can actually get connected in a real way with other people too when we prioritize that in our lives.
Right. And I can see how they all work together too, because having lived my life quite disconnected, head body, because of my stuff, um, when we're more connected within ourselves, with our emotions, with our intellect, our physical being, and our spiritual life, we we're more we can be more present. Like it just they all work together, and then we're more filled with gratitude, and it just keeps feeding each other, right?
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. They're integrated. You know, this is how
Mm,
we can integrate our life into a sense of purpose. And like I
right.
mentioned earlier, the things that we spend most of our time and attention and energy chasing are things that we think are going to make us happy, right? And so we get something, but happiness generally is just this combination of hormones and biochemicals that give us this euphoria or whatever the feeling might be. But those get metabolized and life goes on, and then we're stressed out and angry. But what we're really seeking, I believe, all of us, what we desire is fulfillment and a fulfilling life. But when we use that word fulfillment, we have to ask, what's being fulfilled, right? What exactly about life is being fulfilled? And so many of us, again, are just struggling in this pandemic, and a challenging season for everybody for so many reasons, where we're asking, like, what's the meaning? Right? Like, what's the purpose
Mhm.
here? Right? And I really believe that life is asking us the same thing. Literally, every day that you wake up and you take new breath into your lungs and your heart's beating, life is saying, all right, what's the purpose of you being here? We got a lot going on. What are you bringing to the table? Right. And instead, if we flip the tables around in our mind that way, we now have, again, control to say, okay, what am I going to fulfill in my life? And more than just fulfilling potential, I know that it's to fulfill a purpose that we have. And reframing purpose in a way that it's like, too many people think, well, what's my purpose? Is in I'm going to climb this big mountain and I'm going to get to the peak of it and have purpose, and I did this thing. Whereas, again, purpose being fulfilled means that we're present right now. We're connected. We're
Mhm.
grateful. Like I'm literally fulfilling my purpose in life by showing up here with you, being present, grateful, and connected. When I leave and I'm with my wife or my children, if I'm present with them and I'm connected and I'm grateful with them, I'm serving my purpose as being a good husband. I'm serving my purpose by being a good father. When I'm with my clients that I serve, if I'm with them, helping them grow, and I'm connected and I'm grateful and I'm present with them, I'm serving my purpose in life. And so if we really break down each and every moment that we have that we're blessed with, there are opportunities to serve and fulfill purpose in life all the time. But we're
Right.
too often thinking of ourselves, and we
Mhm.
we we look at ourselves first instead of looking at others before us.
So true. So you mentioned working with clients. Um, Tell everybody how you work with clients and how, if they're interested, they can find out more about working with you.
Yeah, thank you. You heard the laundry list of titles that I had before I
Right?
started. So I have been guilty of being a jack of all trades, for many years in my life, and looking for a more streamlined way to serve. And that's what's become, more recently since the pandemic started specifically, and certainly stepping into 2022. My opportunity to speak is really where I'm excited to serve others. And so, if there are opportunities virtually or in person to speak, that's an area that I'm stepping into, as well as a podcast that I'm relaunching. This will be the third go at it, and there's no mistake about it that my other attempts weren't consistent. But I'm very excited for 2022 to be the year that I can grow my podcast as a platform to serve others. The podcast is Purpose Mindset. And then lastly, the same theme and mission that I've described to everybody, being able to become servant leaders, is something very important to me, especially related to business and to business owners and to entrepreneurs. And so at servant-leader.com is a platform there that I can help others instill in them the principles of servant leadership, so that you aren't just an entrepreneur, you're more than that. And when you become a servant leader, you can have impact at the same time that you create income. And so that's where I'm at. You can find those links at wesleynorthey.com, and kind of go from there in whatever way might be most beneficial for you.
Awesome. And we will include any links that you've given us and anything that comes up in our posts around this podcast, in our show notes, and on our Facebook and Instagram. So
Amazing.
so people can find it there too. And hopefully when you relaunch your podcast and get that going again, we'll put that out there as well, so people can find you when you're ready.
Yeah, it'll be ready by the time this episode is released.
Awesome.
That'll be up and running and going. So I encourage everybody to check it out, and hopefully it helps you on your journey.
Great. So if you could leave our audience with just one thing that you want them to remember from listening to our discussion here, what would that be?
Yeah, again, purpose begins with mindset. It really does. And the greatest way to fulfill it is through servant leadership. So if you are struggling and going through challenges, and if you've had failures in your life, setbacks, it's okay. It's part of the journey. It's part of the process. It's not too late. You are good enough. And I would want everyone to know that I believe in them. Really, if they haven't heard that in a while, I hope that that can be a voice for them to find some hope, and to know that someone believes in them. And if they begin to believe in themselves, anything can truly become possible. I'm a living example of that. And I wish them all nothing but the very best on their journey.
Well, thank you. I think that's an important message for all of us. But also, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your story and for this discussion. Like I said, I could have taken it in so many different directions. There's so much more I want to talk to you about, but we'll save that for another time.
Well, I'm so grateful for you, Kelly, and your platform and how you're showing up for others, and you're a dear friend, and I'm truly thankful to be here. So thanks again for allowing me to share with your guests.
Of course, we'll have you back. Thanks.
Sounds good.